Chris Jones is number one on y'all's list. Let's start there. Eric, this feels interesting to me just because, I mean, Chris Jones he's an incredible talent. I don't think I need to say a whole lot about what Chris Jones means to the Chiefs, and he hasn't been tagged, and yet it feels like all the momentum suggests that he's going to stay in Kansas City. Or is that just like, is that like beer goggles, like post-championship vibes, and once the market opens, that might change? Or what do you see for Chris Jones when teams are actually allowed to talk to him?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Dave. I don't know what his mental state was when he made that statement at the parade that he was coming back. I think his agent would like to, hey, pump the brakes there. Let me do some negotiating before you make that statement. I think that Chris Jones has reached the level of Aaron Donald in terms of his impact. I can't believe I'm saying that as a person that covered, Aaron on a regular basis for 2 years. But when you watched him play in the Super Bowl and the impact that he had in the postseason, I think he's now reached that level and probably deserves to be paid in that same range, which is low to mid 30s annually. With where the Chiefs are in the cap, not sure how they're going to get that done in terms of the financial finagling that they're going to have to do to make it happen. But certainly they seem committed to having him there, at least for the upcoming season in order to defend their title. And I think their defense is much different, and they're not able to do what they can do on the back end if he's not there on a consistent basis on the front end. So I expect that they're going to figure out how to get it done, but we'll see.
The other thing that makes it interesting is, and we talked about all these guys that have been franchise tagged because of where they are financially. The Dolphins have very noteworthy not tagged Christian
Mhm.
Wilkins, who I don't think anybody puts Christian Wilkins on the same tier as Chris Jones, but he is a phenomenal player. And guys like this don't hit free agency very often. I think these are both going to be very eye-popping numbers. I feel a little bit more confident that Chris Jones will stay with his team, whereas I think Christian Wilkins is very, very likely gone from Miami. But how this stuff works out, and does Chris Jones need to sign before Christian Wilkins settles on a number, that type of stuff, I think is going to be very intriguing next week.
Yeah, no doubt. And Christian, because of his age, is unique, in terms of a defensive tackle that is that talented, hitting the free agent market. Last year the Niners were able to sign Hargrave, and I think he improved their defense. And I think this is something similar. If you're a team, perhaps like the Lions that got to the NFC title game last year, and you need interior defensive line help, that's going to kind of push your team over the top, and you're willing to spend some cash. I think that's a player that you look hard at. That's going to kind of change the trajectory of what you're able to do defensively.
I had something different in mind for Greg, because Greg, I appreciate the irony here. You cover the NFC South, and obviously somebody had to win that division, but the intrigue during the season was not all that great. And so for instance, you weren't on the pod as often as Eric was talking about the 49ers and their run to the Super Bowl. But the NFC South is incredibly interesting when you're talking about resetting the league year, because the NFC South is in the thick of it for arguably the two most important free agents in this class of free agents. Obviously, the Atlanta Falcons have been strongly linked to Kirk Cousins here over the last week or so. And Baker Mayfield as well is angling for a new deal, maybe in Tampa Bay. Let's start with Kirk. Do you buy the validity to, I mean, it's getting a little crazy. Like we're connecting the dots that his wife is from Atlanta. Kyle Pitts is responding to rumors on social media that he maybe had an agreement with Kirk Cousins about wearing number 8. I mean, how much validity do you think there is to this?
No, I think there's something to it. There might be a little bit more smoke than fire at this point. I'm not sure when the tampering window for jersey number negotiation begins in the NFL, but it makes sense. If you look at the Falcons, to me, last year what killed them was kind of that summer of inaction, of not pursuing a free agent, of not chasing Lamar Jackson, of not moving up in the draft, and being content to move forward with Des Ridder as their guy at quarterback. That's why Arthur Smith got fired. It's why they're 7-10 for a third year in a row. So it will not surprise me at all if if Raheem Morris, if Terry Fontenot take the opposite tack and they absolutely swing for the fences, that could mean giving Kirk Cousins at 35 coming off an Achilles $40 million a year. It could mean trading for Justin Fields. It could mean moving up into the top 3 of the draft. I don't think they'll make the same mistake twice. Cousins would be the most glaring, write a huge check and see what happens. I think it makes sense. I think it's a talented team that finished better than the Vikings did last year. I think he makes them a team that would be expected to be a playoff team. Could probably use another receiver to throw to. But again, it should be a similar offense to what he had with O'Connell in Minnesota. Kind of that Rams-based. Everybody spent a little bit of time in Los Angeles with McKay, so the offenses are all about the same. It would make a lot of sense. If they like Fields would be less expensive, cost a little bit of draft picks, maybe have a little bit more long-term upside. But in terms of making sure this Falcons team won't be confused with last year's, starting your offseason by signing Kirk Cousins is a big step in that direction.
Yeah, I think, it sends a pretty clear signal when Arthur Smith, the former head coach, gets fired largely because of what they didn't do at quarterback. I think they're going to fix it. It's fascinating, and I don't want to get too much into draft talk right here, but it seems like the Vikings and Falcons are both going to make a pitch to Kirk Cousins. Maybe somebody else comes in, but right now it feels like a good guess one of those teams is going to wind up with him. And then the other team, like you mentioned Justin Fields, you also might have to pivot to this year's rookie class. And it's interesting to think the team that loses this sweepstakes might be doing something bold in the draft to get up to take a Jaden Daniels or a JJ McCarthy, whoever it winds up being. It's always interesting to think about how you kind of allocate those resources of like, okay, if we don't get Kirk Cousins, do we have what it takes to answer this question another way?